Ladies and gentlemen, we stand here in an age where shadows are denied and illusions are embraced. In the collective noise of surface attraction and curated personas, the soul, the true essence, is often neglected. Today, we delve not into a condemnation of womanhood, but into a profound and uncomfortable confrontation with the shadow side of some women, those archetypal patterns that, when unacknowledged, can lead men not to love, but to ruin. Some women have mastered the art of persona to such a degree that the boundary between the mask and the authentic self vanishes, not only to others but to themselves. What a man may perceive as natural allure or magnetic warmth is often a finely calibrated projection, designed not to connect but to captivate. This is not the simple, everyday masking we all do in public spaces. It is a deeper, more insidious construction of identity, rooted in unconscious strategy. The persona becomes armor and bait in one, means of gaining trust while concealing the inner emptiness or unresolved pain beneath. In this performance, a man is often not seen for who he is, but for what function he serves in her narrative. His attention is the fuel, his admiration the mirror. She may not consciously intend harm. She may believe herself sincere, but the danger lies in the fact that she, too, is asleep to her deeper motivations. The man, drawn to her confidence and presence, finds himself gradually enmeshed in a fantasy, one in which he is not truly required to be real, only to remain useful. He will be rewarded for playing his role well and punished, subtly or overtly, when he does not. It begins with praise, often excessive, the kind of validation that feels like destiny, a divine connection. It intoxicates. She seems to see him more clearly than anyone ever has. He opens, reveals, becomes vulnerable. But what she sees is often not him, but an ideal she projects onto him. He is desired not for his truth, but for his potential as a character in her script. And when he eventually diverges from the image she has built, when he exhibits independent thought or complexity that doesn't serve her fantasy, the persona shifts, the warmth becomes cold, the attention withers. The enchantment vanishes. What makes this even more difficult to detect is how socially celebrated this persona often is. Society has long idealized charm, grace, external poise. She may be seen as the perfect woman by others, stylish, articulate, socially adept, emotionally expressive. Yet beneath this performance, there may be little capacity for genuine intimacy, because intimacy requires the surrender of control. It requires not being perfect, but being present. The persona cannot risk this. It must remain curated, admired, unchallenged. And so, her relationships often exist within the safety of seduction, never the danger of being known. For the man caught in this web, the realization does not arrive easily. He often experiences confusion first, an aching sense that something is off, though everything appears beautiful. He may blame himself for the emotional disconnection he begins to feel. He might try harder, give more, lose himself in the effort to return to the initial enchantment. But that initial moment was a mirage, a performance, a mask that was never meant to stay. The truth is, she cannot offer what she does not possess herself: authentic connection, emotional transparency, self-awareness. This phenomenon is not about cruelty or conscious deceit. It is often the result of unresolved trauma, insecurity cloaked in elegance, and a desperate need to control how others perceive her. The mask is not worn to deceive out of malice. It is worn because she believes that without it, she has no worth. And this belief is the real tragedy. But for the man, unless he learns to see beyond surface qualities, unless he becomes attuned to what lies beneath appearances, he will continue to fall for the same illusion in different forms. He must learn to recognize that charm is not character, that attention is not affection, and that admiration is not love. Only then can he protect himself from the spell of the persona and begin to seek what is real, even if it is less shiny, less convenient, and far more difficult to find. There exists a type of woman whose affection does not liberate but entangles, whose care does not nurture but consumes, and whose love does not uplift but slowly suffocates the essence of a man. At first glance, she may appear as the epitome of loyalty and dedication, always available, always attentive, always concerned about his well-being. She asks the right questions, anticipates needs, makes sacrifices, and seems, at least in the early stages, to offer a kind of emotional sanctuary. But this warmth carries a hidden cost. Beneath the tenderness lies an unspoken expectation, compliance, emotional dependence, and the slow erosion of the man's autonomy. This is not partnership. It is possession wrapped in the illusion of devotion. Her love is conditional, though it may not be immediately clear. She rarely says what she demands outright. Instead, she uses a subtler language, a raised eyebrow when he makes a decision she didn't approve of, a cold silence when he asserts his independence, a gentle mockery disguised as concern when he dares to express something unfamiliar to her script. What seems like nurturing becomes a form of shaping, molding him into a version that she feels safe with, one she can predict, one she can manage. Over time, the man begins to shrink, not physically, not even overtly emotionally, but internally. His inner compass starts to spin. His instincts become dulled. He begins to second-guess himself, wondering whether his desires, ambitions, or even thoughts are valid. Without her confirmation. She does not raise her voice. She does not strike. Her control is emotional and psychic, not physical. It is rooted in a form of dominance that thrives in ambiguity. He is not chained, but he feels unable to move. He is not silenced, yet he finds himself unable to speak freely. Her love, in its shadow form, is an inverted mirror of what love should be. Instead of expanding his world, it narrows it. Instead of freeing him to become more of himself, it binds him to a role where deviation is betrayal. What makes this dynamic especially disorienting is that it is often praised by others. She is viewed as committed, loyal, deeply involved. People admire the way she supports her partner, how she sacrifices for the relationship. Few see the quiet tyranny beneath the surface. Fewer still notice how the man becomes smaller, less vibrant, more confused over time. He may not even notice it himself, at least not until the cost becomes too great, and even then he may blame himself. After all, she was so good to him. She loved him. He may feel ungrateful, ashamed for wanting to breathe outside of her embrace. Her need for control is often rooted in fear. Fear of abandonment, of uncertainty, of vulnerability. But rather than face this fear directly, she seeks to dominate her environment, especially her partner. She confuses love with security and views freedom as a threat. In her unconscious world, love must mean being everything to someone and having them be everything to her. Anything less is a form of rejection. She does not understand that real love allows space, breadth, and unpredictability. She believes love must be tightly held, vigilantly managed, and never questioned to her. The man is not a separate being, but a limb of her identity. His individuality is not a gift, but a threat to the emotional structure she has built. If he dares to grow, to evolve in ways she does not recognize or approve of, she feels destabilized, and so she reacts, sometimes with tears, sometimes with guilt, sometimes with seductive pleas for closeness. But it always returns to the same message: you are only safe, you are only loved, when you remain within the bounds I have set for you. Over time, this form of love becomes a cage, gold, plated, lined with velvet, but a cage nonetheless. And the man, if he does not awaken, becomes a ghost of himself, loved deeply, yet never truly seen. Some women have learned, consciously or unconsciously, how to wield emotion not as a form of connection, but as a form of power. This is not the raw, honest emotion that brings two people closer, that heals, that allows one to be seen and held in vulnerability. This is something different, something crafted, aimed, delivered with precision. In this dynamic, emotion becomes a weapon. Tears are not always expressions of pain, but signals meant to induce guilt. Silence is not about introspection, but punishment. Outbursts are not uncontrolled moments of feeling, but calculated disruptions meant to destabilize the other. In this space, emotional expression is not a bridge to intimacy. It is a tool of influence, sometimes even of psychological warfare. The man often finds himself in a state of confusion. He believes he has done something wrong, though he cannot name what. He attempts to repair a rupture he doesn't fully understand. The rules of engagement are unclear, shifting from one moment to the next. What pleased her yesterday offends her today. What once made her smile now evokes withdrawal. The man starts to monitor himself. He softens his voice, censors his opinions, tiptoes through emotional landmines he cannot see. He is not trying to manipulate her. He is trying to survive the atmosphere. In doing so, he slowly detaches from his own emotional truth, exchanging it for a constantly adjusting strategy of appeasement. She may appear sensitive, delicate, profoundly emotional, yet her emotions always seem to come with strings attached. When she cries, he feels responsible. When she is angry, he feels to blame. When she retreats into silence, he becomes the one who must bridge the gap. This is not the shared vulnerability that creates closeness, but a kind of emotional domination, where only one person's inner world is allowed to matter, and the other must orbit around it at the cost of his own inner stability. The relationship becomes asymmetrical, not in material terms, but in emotional energy. One person becomes the emotional center, the other becomes a servant to that center. It is easy to mistake this kind of emotional behavior for depth. The intensity can be seductive, her passion, her highs and lows, her unpredictable tides. They can make her seem alive in a way that is almost addictive. For a man who is disconnected from his own feelings, she may even seem like a portal to a more vivid emotional life. But what he fails to see is that he is not being invited into authentic emotional intimacy. He is being swept into a performance that keeps her in control and him in a state of anxious responsiveness. Her volatility keeps him engaged, not because he is truly connecting, but because he is trying to make sense of what's happening. His nervous system stays activated. He confuses anxiety with chemistry. This pattern is not always malicious. In many cases, it stems from her own deep, unresolved pain. Perhaps she learned early in life that the only way to be seen was to suffer loudly. Perhaps her emotions were ignored unless they were explosive. Over time, she discovered that drama brings attention, that breakdowns bring closeness, that fragility becomes leverage. She may not even realize she's doing it, but intent does not lessen impact. A man caught in this cycle slowly forgets what it feels like to be emotionally grounded. He begins to live in a kind of permanent alertness, never knowing when the next wave will crash, always bracing, always adjusting, rarely breathing freely. This kind of emotional manipulation, especially when dressed in vulnerability, is difficult to identify because it exploits the very values. That healthy love is built on compassion, empathy, care. The man wants to be kind, to be supportive, to hold space. But he does not realize he is no longer holding space. He is being held hostage in it. And the longer he stays, the more he internalizes the idea that emotional chaos is love, that unpredictability is passion, that pain is connection. He forgets that real intimacy is not built on constant crisis, but on mutual presence, honest communication, and emotional balance. There is a deeply rooted dynamic that often goes unnoticed, subtle yet profoundly destabilizing, and it is found in the pattern of the woman who lives through the posture of the eternal victim. Her power does not come from assertiveness, strength, or control in any obvious form. Instead, it emerges from weakness, real or performed, that draws others, especially men, into a position of constant rescuing, repairing, and caretaking. She does not ask directly for power, she gains it by never seeming to have any. She may not raise her voice, demand attention, or assert her dominance, yet she often ends up at the center of every emotional situation. Her wounds, her struggles, her constant misfortunes seem to call out for help, and the man, moved by a natural desire to protect and support, responds in good faith, believing his strength can heal her suffering at first. This dynamic may feel noble, even romantic. The man sees her pain and wants to be the one who brings peace to it. Her story tugs at his heart, her sadness awakens something chivalrous in him. She becomes not just a woman to love but a cause to serve. He feels chosen, needed, maybe even heroic. But over time the pattern begins to show. Her pain never seems to resolve. Every step forward is followed by a mysterious regression. Every solution offered is met with a new problem. The man starts to notice that no matter how much he gives, time, attention, reassurance, energy, it is never quite enough. Her well of distress has no bottom. She is not healing. She is circling, repeating, pulling everything around her into the orbit of her victim. Her suffering is always the focal point, even when she insists it's not. Any attempt by the man to express his own feelings is quietly redirected. If he voices frustration, it is met with hurt confusion. If he tries to assert a boundary, she reacts as though he is abandoning her. This leaves him in a difficult position. If he withdraws, she suffers more. If he stays, he is drained. Over time, he learns that the only way to maintain peace is to suppress himself. His needs shrink in proportion to her constant emergencies. He becomes emotionally malnourished while trying to feed her endless hunger for reassurance and care. This tactic, though often unconscious, is profoundly effective because it uses empathy against the empathic. The woman may appear powerless, but in her helplessness lies a covert form of control. Her fragility becomes a kind of emotional weapon. The threat is not that she will hurt him, but that she will be hurt by him. The man is made to feel guilty not for doing something wrong, but for not doing enough, for not being more available, more patient, more attuned. He is trained to see his own limits as failures of character. What she needs, she implies, is total devotion, constant emotional labor, and complete emotional merging. The deeper truth is that some people become addicted to their suffering. Their identity becomes inseparable from the pain they carry. They feel seen when they are broken, important when they are in crisis. The drama of perpetual misfortune becomes a substitute for real intimacy, and the man, caught in this dynamic, becomes less of a partner and more of an emotional caretaker. His presence is not desired for who he is, but for what he provides: stability, validation, a temporary sense of being whole. Yet it is never sustained. As soon as she feels better, she finds a way back to distress, because the cycle is familiar, safe, even comforting in its repetition. This relationship dynamic is difficult to escape because it does not present as abusive in the traditional sense. There is no shouting, no aggression, no visible domination. It is built on guilt, emotional dependency, and a subtle inversion of responsibility. The man is never asked directly to sacrifice his peace, but he does so, bit by bit, until one day he realizes that he no longer feels like himself. He has become a shadow of the person he once was, endlessly responsible for someone who claims to be powerless, yet who holds complete power over the emotional tone of the relationship. You said, Keynote 5 expended into the 600 words don't ending sentences. Don't add any headings, ChatGPT said. Every man carries within him an inner myth, a symbolic structure, not just of who he is, but of what he is meant to become. It is a silent architecture built from instinct, ancestral memory, longing, and spiritual direction. This myth is not about ego or external success, but about alignment with one's deepest purpose, the unfolding of the soul through struggle, choice, sacrifice, and triumph. It speaks in dreams, in restlessness, in the quiet voice that says, "This is not your path," even when everything looks fine from the outside. But when a man does not know this myth, when he has not listened to it or has buried it under the noise of approval, seeking surface pleasures or external validation, he becomes vulnerable to losing himself in places where he believes he is finding love. The dark truth is not only in the actions of certain women, but in the way men abandon their center in response to them. A man who is disconnected from his myth becomes easy to shape, easy to sway, easy to seduce into roles that are not his own. He begins to confuse emotional highs with destiny, praise with acceptance, dependence with love. He may find himself becoming what she wants, what she needs, what she demands, not because she has coerced him, but because he has not rooted himself in who he truly is. Without that root, he is like a tree swaying violently in every storm, mistaking the wind for direction. And the winds of relationship, when they are governed by unconscious dynamics, do not lead upward, they spiral downward into confusion, resentment, and emotional disintegration. When a man forgets his myth, he forgets how to say no. Not just to her, but to the seduction of being wanted, being needed, being central to someone else's life. He thinks he is being loving, being present, being committed, but underneath he is often afraid. Afraid of rejection, afraid of aloneness, afraid of discovering that without someone to reflect him, he does not know who he is. And in that fear, he becomes a version of himself that is more palatable, more agreeable, more compliant. He smiles when he should speak, he stays when he should walk, he apologizes when he should confront. He trades his truth for peace, his instinct for permission, his direction for approval. This loss is subtle at first. It begins in small compromises, laughing at jokes that don't resonate, agreeing to plans that drain him, reshaping his routines, his priorities, even his dreams around the gravitational pull of someone else's expectations. Over time he begins to dim, not all at once, but gradually. He loses the fire in his voice, the clarity in his decisions, the vitality in his presence. His internal compass becomes quiet. His myth becomes a forgotten story. And then, when things inevitably begin to fall apart, when the relationship becomes strained, or controlling, or empty, he looks back and cannot recognize how far he has drifted from himself. The initiation of a man does not come through comfort. It comes through confrontation with the truth about who he is, what he values, what he is called to protect, and what he must be willing to lose in order to remain whole. If he has not faced this inner trial, if he has not dared to walk the wilderness of self before entering a bond with another, he will confuse attachment for connection and performance for authenticity. He will enter into relationships not as a sovereign being, but as an actor waiting for a script, waiting for cues, waiting to be told who he is allowed to be. And in doing so, he forfeits the very essence that makes him a man capable of loving without losing, giving without surrendering, merging without dissolving. The task is not to fear women or to reject relationship, but to remember that no love is real if it asks for the abandonment of your soul's direction. A man must know the shape of his path before he invites someone to walk it with him. He must hold the center, not because she demands it, but because without it, he becomes a hollow reflection of who he was meant to be. This speech is not an attack, it is a mirror. Not all women wear this shadow, but all humans carry a shadow. It is only by bringing it to light that we are freed from its grip. So, men, let this not make you bitter, but wiser. Do not seek women who are perfect. seek those who are whole. Choose not only with your eyes, but with your soul. Know your myth, hold your center, love deeply, but never at the cost of your own truth, because in the end, the most dangerous woman is not the one who deceives, but the one who reflects the parts of yourself you have never dared to see.